The gunshot tore through the quiet of the small Colorado apartment, like lightning splitting the sky. Megan Price, 33, never even opened her eyes. She had been asleep on the living room couch, a blanket twisted around her legs, when her ex-boyfriend Chris Dalton stood over her. The cold barrel of his handgun pressed briefly against her cheek before he pulled the trigger. The bullet entered her mouth, shattering teeth, ripping through flesh, and embedding deep in her jaw. Blood sprayed across the couch cushions, splattering the wall in a violent arc. Her phone, lying just inches from her hand, lit up from a new text she would never read. Chris didn't run, not yet. He just stood there, breathing heavily, staring down at the woman who had once loved him enough to let him sleep under her roof when he had nowhere else to go. His hand trembled, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. From somewhere in the apartment complex, a dog began barking. A baby cried. A neighbor's TV blared an old sitcom laugh track. Life went on, unaware that in apartment 3B, everything had changed forever. Chris finally stepped back, leaving her bleeding but alive. Barely. He turned toward the door, and that's when the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway. On the surface, Megan Price's life was finally starting to settle. She had her small but tidy two-bedroom apartment in Aurora, Colorado, a steady job at a local veterinary clinic, and a group of friends who had helped her heal after her messy breakup with Chris Dalton 8 months earlier. The relationship had started like many do, with laughter, late-night takeout, and promises they thought they meant. But slowly, Chris had changed. His drinking increased. His jealousy sharpened. By the time Megan told him to move out, they were more strangers than lovers. That should have been the end. But Chris didn't vanish. He drifted in and out of her life in small, manipulative ways, texting her when he accidentally drove past her street, showing up at the coffee shop she liked, sending long, late-night apologies. Megan's friends warned her not to respond. "He's trying to keep a foot in the door," her co-worker Jenna had said. But Megan had a soft heart, and Chris knew it. So when he showed up in late October, standing on her doorstep in the cold, claiming he'd been evicted and had nowhere else to go, she hesitated. "It's just for a night or two," Chris said, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "I'll sleep on the couch. You won't even know I'm here." Megan sighed, the wind biting at her face. "Just a couple nights," she said. The first night was awkward but uneventful. Megan locked her bedroom door, telling herself it was just a precaution. The second night, Chris cooked dinner, acting as if they were back together, but Megan ignored the comment about how good it felt to be home. By the fourth night, she regretted letting him in at all. He stayed up late, pacing the living room, talking to people on the phone in hushed tones. His mood shifted fast, 1 minute calm, the next snappy. She started to notice the smell of alcohol again. On the 6th night, she told him he needed to leave. Chris didn't argue. He just stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, then said, "Sure, tomorrow morning." That night, Megan fell asleep on the couch, too tired to make it to her bedroom. She had no idea that Chris was still awake, sitting in the dark kitchen, a loaded gun in his lap. When he finally stood, the apartment was silent except for her steady breathing. He walked toward her, each step slow and deliberate, and that's when he stopped for a moment, looking down at her. The blanket was pulled up to her chin, her hair slightly messy from sleep. For a brief second, his expression softened. Then it hardened again. Chris crouched beside the couch, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the gun. He could hear his own pulse pounding in his ears. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice told him to walk away. But another voice, louder, angrier, kept whispering that she betrayed him, that she deserved this. He lifted the gun, the barrel inches from her skin. Megan stirred slightly, her lips parting in a soft sigh. Before she could wake, the deafening crack of the shot exploded in the room. The bullet tore through her mouth, smashing bone, shredding flesh. She jerked violently, her eyes flying open in shock and pain. Blood filled her throat instantly, making her choke and gag. She clawed at the blanket, struggling to breathe. Chris froze, staring at the blood pooling beneath her head, the red spray across the wall. His breathing quickened, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a mile. Then the sound. Footsteps in the hall. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Chris's eyes darted to the door. If someone came in, he'd be trapped. He grabbed his jacket, shoving the gun into the pocket. But before he could move, there was a knock. "Megan? You okay in there?" A man's voice called out. It was her neighbor, Mr. Patterson. Chris looked down at her one last time, her body trembling, blood spilling from her mouth as she tried to form words. The call came in at 2:17 a.m. to Aurora Police Dispatch. Possible shooting, 3412 West Grove Street, apartment 3B. The neighbor who made the call, Robert Patterson, told the operator he'd heard a loud bang, followed by strange choking sounds and then silence. Detective Laura Jennings was already awake when the alert came through. Nights like this were part of the job. Nights when you throw on yesterday's jeans, grab your badge, and drive into the kind of darkness that has no stars. When she arrived at the scene, the building's hallway smelled faintly of burnt coffee and bleach. Uniformed officers were holding back a small crowd of residents in pajamas. The sound of someone crying echoed down the corridor. Victims alive. An EMT told her, meeting her at the door. Female, mid-30s. Gunshot wound to the mouth. Heavy blood loss, but she's conscious, barely. We're rushing her to University Hospital now. Laura stepped into the apartment. It was small but tidy, except for the chaos of the living room. The couch was soaked in blood, cushions torn from the struggle. A mug lay shattered on the floor, coffee staining the carpet. On the wall, a thin mist of blood had dried in a spray pattern, telling her where the shooter had stood. "Any witnesses?" she asked. "Neighbor across the hall," Officer Ramirez said. Said he heard the shot and came to check. Says he knocked but didn't see anyone leave. Swears the door was unlocked when he tried it, but he didn't go inside. Laura scanned the room, her eyes catching something under the couch. A small, scuffed keychain in the shape of a silver guitar pick. She picked it up with gloved hands. "Bag this," she told Ramirez. "And get me the neighbor." Robert Patterson was a wiry man in his 60s, still in a faded Broncos hoodie. His voice shook as he spoke. "I've lived across from Megan for 5 years. She's a good neighbor. I don't know why anyone would do this to her. She's been letting some guys stay here the last week. Tall, shaved head, maybe 35. Never got his name, but he gave me a weird feeling." Laura's pen froze mid-note. "Was he here tonight?" Robert's eyes shifted to the open doorway. "I didn't see him, but when I knocked, I swear I heard movement inside before it went quiet." The words lodged in Laura's mind. If the shooter was still in the building, every second mattered. She signaled 2 uniforms to start a sweep of the complex. But as she stood in that blood-stained living room, she couldn't shake the feeling that the suspect wasn't far, and that he already knew the police were coming for him. And then, just as they were about to close the perimeter, a young officer came running down the hall. "Detective," security camera picked him up. "He's on foot, headed east." Laura didn't even wait for the officer to finish. "Get me that footage," she snapped, already moving toward the building's small security office. The place smelled like stale cigarettes and dust, with an ancient monitor blinking faintly in the corner. The guard on duty, a sleepy-looking man named Harris, pulled up the recording. This is from the east side exit, about 5 minutes ago. The grainy black and white footage flickered to life. At 2:14 a.m., the door swung open, and a tall man stepped into view. Shaved head, dark jacket. He kept his face angled away from the camera, but Laura noticed his stride, fast, almost frantic, in his right hand. He carried something heavy stuffed into his pocket. "Freeze it there," Laura said. She leaned closer to the screen. Just before he disappeared from the frame, the man glanced up at the streetlight outside. It was only for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. His face was partly visible. The image was blurry, but distinct enough to run through their facial recognition database. "Copy that face," Laura told Harris. "Send it to the tech team now." By the time she stepped back into the hall, the paramedics were wheeling Megan out on a stretcher. Her face was pale, her hair matted with blood. The oxygen mask covered most of her features, but her eyes were open, wide, and terrified. Laura walked beside her for a few steps. "Megan, my name's Detective Jennings." We're going to get the man who did this to you. Do you understand? Megan's gaze locked on hers. She tried to speak, but the words came out as muffled, bloody gasps. Laura squeezed her hand. Don't try to talk. Just hold on. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the siren wailed into the cold Colorado night. Back inside, Officer Ramirez approached. We got something. The neighbor across the hall, Patterson. He says the guy's name might be Chris. Said he overheard Megan call him that once. Laura's stomach tightened. She had dealt with cases like this before. Ex-boyfriends, tempers, grudges that never died. They were some of the hardest to stop because they were fueled by emotions, not logic. Run Chris with Megan Price's known associates. Laura ordered. Focus on any recent restraining orders, police reports, or 911 calls involving her address. Ramirez nodded and hurried off. Laura took one last look at the living room before leaving. The silver guitar-pick keychain lay sealed in an evidence bag on the coffee table. Something about it nagged at her, but she couldn't place why. Out in the parking lot, the wind had picked up, whipping through the bare branches. The snow hadn't started yet, but the forecast said it would by morning. If Chris was on foot, the cold might slow him down, but it might also drive him to desperate measures. Laura's phone buzzed. A text from the tech team. Match found. Chris Dalton, 35. Prior record, assault, DUI, illegal possession of firearm. She stared at the screen for a moment. The pieces starting to fall into place. But then came the part she didn't expect. Another message, seconds later. Alert. Chris Dalton was released on bail last month, and he's wanted in another county for aggravated battery. Laura exhaled slowly. The man they were looking for wasn't just dangerous. He was already running from the law. And now, somewhere out in the freezing dark, he knew the police were hunting him. She pulled her radio to her mouth. All units, be advised, we have an armed suspect, Chris Dalton, fleeing eastbound on foot. Consider him extremely dangerous. Shoot on sight if he poses a threat. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Chris wasn't planning to run forever. He had one last thing to do before he disappeared. And Megan Price was still alive to stop him, if she could survive the night. The snow began to fall around 3 a.m. big, slow flakes swirling under the yellow glow of the streetlights. Laura sat in the passenger seat of her unmarked SUV, scanning the sidewalks as Officer Ramirez drove slowly to the quiet streets east of the apartment complex. Every few blocks, they passed another patrol car doing the same sweep, their headlights cutting to the dark like search beams. Dispatch was buzzing in her earpiece with updates. False sightings, homeless shelters checked, bus stations cleared. Chris Dalton was proving slippery. Then came the call from Unit 12. We've got possible movement near an abandoned gas station on East Colfax. Tall male, dark jacket, shaved head, just ducked inside the building. Laura's pulse kicked up. She grabbed the radio. Unit 12, hold your position. We're 2 minutes out. Ramirez hit the gas, the SUV fishtailing slightly on the wet road. The gas station came into view, a boarded-up shell with graffiti-smeared walls, the awning still faintly displaying prices from years ago. Snow was already piling on the cracked pavement. They pulled in quietly, headlights off. Laura's breath fogged the windshield as she peered at the shattered glass door. Inside, she could see faint movement, a shadow shifting in the dark. Ramirez whispered, "That's him." Laura nodded, unholstering her Glock. "We take him alive if we can. But if he raises that gun..." They moved in, boots crunching in the snow. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the sharp metallic scent of old oil and rust. Chris Dalton, police. Laura's voice cut through the night. "Come out with your hands up." There was a pause. Then, from deep inside the building, Chris's voice came back, low and cold. "She's still breathing, isn't she?" Laura stiffened. "Megan Price? She's in the hospital. You're not going to finish what you started." A harsh laugh echoed through the empty station. "You don't know what I started." Before she could respond, a shape darted between the aisles of dusty shelves, heading toward the back exit. Laura and Ramirez sprinted after him. flashlights bouncing, their footsteps pounding against the warped floorboards. They burst into the rear storage room just in time to see Chris shove open a side door and vanish into the swirling snow. Outside, the storm had grown worse. The wind whipped flakes into Laura's eyes, blinding her as she chased a dark figure through the lot. Somewhere to her left, Ramirez shouted, but the sound was swallowed by the gale. Then a single, deafening gunshot split the night. Laura dug behind a rusted dumpster, her heart hammering. She couldn't see Chris anymore. All she could hear was the wind and the faint, crunching sound of footsteps moving away. And she knew, if they lost him now, the next time they found Chris Dalton, someone else might be dead. Laura's breath came in sharp bursts, the icy air burning her lungs. She listened, every muscle taut. The footsteps were fading, swallowed by the snowstorm. She glanced toward Ramirez's last position. "Ramirez!" she hissed into her radio. No answer. A chill, not from the cold, ran through her. She broke cover, moving low and fast across the lot. Her gun up, the beam from her flashlight cut through the storm in quick sweeps until it landed on a figure lying half in the snow, half against the wall of the building. "Ramirez!" He groaned, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, stark red against the white snow. "I'm good," he gritted out, "just grazed. He aimed to slow me down, not kill me." Laura's jaw clenched. Chris wasn't running without a plan. He was playing with them. From somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of an engine started up. Laura's head snapped toward the sound. Through the snow, barely visible, was a dark sedan idling at the mouth of an alley. "That's our ride," she muttered. But before she could move, the car's headlights flared, and it peeled away, tires spinning on the slick asphalt. Ramirez struggled to his feet. If he's got a car, he could be anywhere in 15 minutes. "Not anywhere," Laura said, already pulling out her phone. "Dalton's not the type to run blind. He's the type to tie up loose ends." Her gut twisted as she spoke. Megan Price was lying in University Hospital, barely holding on. And if Chris really meant to finish what he started, she knew exactly where he was going. Laura grabbed the radio. "All units, be advised. Suspect may be en route to University Hospital. Lock down all entrances. Armed response at the ready." Ramirez blinked at her through the snow. "You think he'd actually walk into a hospital full of cops?" She holstered her weapon, already heading for the SUV. "If it means getting to her before we can stop him? Yeah, I think he would." They hit the road, sirens screaming, the storm closing in around them. As the wipers fought against the thickening snow, Laura's mind replayed Chris's voice in the gas station. "You don't know what I started." Whatever his end game was, she had the sinking feeling Megan's survival wasn't the only thing at stake tonight. And less than 4 miles away, in a dim hospital room, Megan stirred awake, just as a tall shadow moved past the glass of her door. The fluorescent hallway lights at University Hospital buzzed faintly, casting a cold, sterile glow over the night shift. Most of the building was quiet, save for the occasional squeak of a nurse's sneakers or the distant beep of a heart monitor. In room 214, Megan lay propped slightly on the bed, her head wrapped in gauze, tubes and wires snaking from her arms and nose. Her jaw throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat, the pain so sharp it made her vision swim. She could taste metal blood and hear the muffled echo of her own breath through the oxygen cannula. She thought she was dreaming when she first saw the shadow move across the narrow strip of light under the door. But then it came again, slower this time, and stopped completely. Her pulse spiked. The handle turned. She tried to sit up, panic surging, but her body felt heavy and uncooperative. The door eased open just an inch, just enough for her to see the silhouette of a man. "Megan," Chris's voice whispered through the crack, low and taunting. "You're tougher than I thought." Her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted toward the nurse call button on the side rail. It was inches away, but in her current state, those inches felt like miles. Chris slipped into the room, his jacket dusted with snow, his hands hidden in the deep pockets. He moved with a calmness that was more chilling than any shout. "They've got cops here," Megan croaked, her voice muffled and raw. Chris smirked. "Cops get tired. Nurses get distracted. and you won't make a sound. He stepped closer to the bed, his eyes cold, scanning the monitors as if calculating how much time he had. Megan's fingers inched toward the call button, her movements hidden under the blanket. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Then footsteps, quick, purposeful, coming down the hall. Chris's head snapped toward the sound. His hand slipped from his pocket, revealing the black shape of a pistol. The door burst open, flooding the room with light. Police? Drop it. Laura Jennings stood framed in the doorway, her weapon leveled, Ramirez right behind her. Chris's face twisted, half surprise, half fury. He turned toward Megan, his finger tightening on the trigger. And in that frozen second, Laura had to decide whether to fire or risk him pulling the trigger first. Laura didn't think. She acted. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of her Glock echoed through the hospital room, deafening in the enclosed space. Chris jerked backward, the pistol clattering from his hand as he collapsed against the wall. Ramirez was on him instantly, kicking the gun away and forcing him to ground. "Hands behind your back," he barked. Chris struggled for a moment, but it was weak, desperate, like he knew it was over. The cuffs clicked shut with finality. Laura rushed to Megan's side. "You're safe now," she said, lowering her weapon. Tears welled in Megan's eyes. She tried to speak, but the pain was too much. Instead, she reached for Laura's hand, gripping it tightly. "EMS!" Laura shouted into the hallway. Nurses and doctors poured in, checking Megan's vitals and adjusting her oxygen. The steady beep of her heart monitor was the only sound that mattered now. Chris was hauled to his feet, his expression a mixture of defiance and fear. As Ramirez led him out, Laura followed, her voice cold. "You're going away for a long time, Dalton." 3 months later. The trial was swift. The prosecution had more than enough evidence. The security footage in the apartment, the silver guitar pick keychain, proven to be his, left at the scene, ballistics matching his gun to the bullet pulled from Megan's jaw, and most damning of all, Megan's own testimony. She had to write her statement on paper, her jaw still wired shut during the trial, but the jury saw the truth in her eyes. The verdict came back in less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, illegal possession of a firearm, and violation of parole. Chris Dalton was sentenced to 40 years in state prison with no chance of parole for the first 25. Aftermath. Megan's recovery was slow and painful. Multiple surgeries rebuilt her jaw and teeth. Eating, speaking, and even smiling were battles she had to win all over again. But she did win. On the day she finally returned to her job at the veterinary clinic, Laura stopped by with a small gift, a new silver keychain. This one shaped like a paw print. "No bad memories attached," Laura said with a smile. Megan turned it over in her hand, then met Laura's eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Laura shook her head. "You're the one who didn't give up." They stood there for a moment, the cold Colorado air spilling in from the open door, both knowing how close the night in apartment 3B had come to ending differently. But Megan had survived, and Chris Dalton would never get another chance. Justice, this time, had arrived in time.